farther we go from nature, the more resistance we face in our own survival. Hello and welcome, I'm Sadhika Tiwari and you're watching Eco India. Nature supports our very survival, but often it is greed that pushes us to exploit it and work against it. But finding our way back and working with nature is the only sustainable way. And today's episode is all about that. I consider myself to be an empowered woman. I also have access to almost all types of menstrual hygiene products, including the sustainable ones like menstrual cups or discs. But several women in India don't have access to anything at all. And things like menstrual cups are often not preferred for cultural reasons, in which case pads become the most widely picked option. But as a climate journalist and as a woman, they come to me with a lot of guilt because I know that pads choke the planet. But this might change soon, and the solutions are all natural.
A bag marked with a red dot warns the garbage workers that they are handling sensitive private waste, like dirty diapers, used condoms, and menstrual pads.
If you are disgusted by your own waste, imagine how we feel. We have to touch it with the same hands that we eat with.
The so-called Red Dot campaign that urges residents to separate their sanitary waste is driven by Swachh, a cooperative of sanitation workers like Vidya Naignaware. This scheme is unique to Pune, a city in India's western state of Maharashtra. The city currently has 3,700 Swachh workers who collect waste from almost 1 million households, nearly 70% of the entire city. The fees are paid by the individual households. It costs roughly €1 per month for an apartment. By paying and separating their waste, the residents are acknowledging the dignity of the workers and the services they are getting.
We started telling the citizens to wrap up the sanitary waste before handing it over to us, because it also affects our health.
As access to hygiene products has improved, so has the problem of waste. Much of this waste is non-biodegradable and when burnt releases toxic gases, as plastic tends to be a big component of sanitary products. In India so far, this waste mostly ends up in landfills and incinerators. But this is now changing. The local government of Pune was the first civic body in India to enact sanitary waste recycling, waste collected by the workers of the Red Dot campaign. We were not allowed to film the recycling since the project is still in an early stage. The city is using a plant provided by US multinational company Procter & Gamble, the world's leading diaper maker and one of the biggest contributors to the problem.
The plant has a capacity of 50 tons per week. This is the first, the big plant, or this capacity plant is first in India or the first in the world. Disinfection will be done, and then the recycling of all the parts, means the fiber, cloth, cotton, and everything will be separated, segregated, and each and every component will be recycled.
The Pune-based startup PatCare has gone a step further. It already has a patent for its technology. The company collects sanitary pads in specially designed bins. Then they are taken to the plant to be processed.
At source disposal, we have developed dedicated pad care bin, which is small compact device. We are providing it free of cost. That goes into individual cubicle where user can dispose the pad, or the woman can dispose the pad while maintaining her own health, hygiene and privacy. The beauty of these bins, these pads can store for 30 days without any odor and bacterial growth. That ensures the hygiene aspect. Then our trained EHS staff, service executives are going there collecting the sanitary waste.
In the processing plant, the pads are shredded, disinfected and decolorized by a machine especially developed by PatCare. At the end of the process, two types of material are left.
One is a plastic, which is a PE rich, and one is this kind of pulp. This pulp is more than 98% pure, having different application in different industries like paper and packaging industry. This plastic we convert into this kind of granules, right? And these granules we are converting back to the pad care bin that goes into the client location or a woman where she is disposing the pad. So this is how we are taking the circularity into the picture.
The business model seems to be working out. Though the pad care bins are free of cost, customers are charged per pickup and per bin. This accounts for 80% of the revenue of the company. It wants to take the technology to a global level and says there is already huge interest from Western countries. Experts point out, however, that it is the manufacturing companies that are a big part of the problem because they don't have a solution to the waste that is created later on. Fixing that problem through technology, although much needed, is not enough, experts say. The bigger issue is the generation of the waste itself.
I think the first important elephant that we need to address in the room is behavior change. How do you get everybody to behave in a certain way with their sanitary waste, right? The second piece which I really like is where you have far more fun, engaging conversations on women and you talk to them about what are these really cool options. So for example, my idea of a cloth pad was very, purane zamane ka, some torn rag or whatever. Until I found out that they're so pretty looking, right? Even that can be a great conversation to initiate with people and get them to understand how to use it.
An effective system will need individuals and authorities to work together. While reusable options like cloth pads have entered markets, they have barely made a dent. Experts think that the problem of sanitary waste can be solved, but only when large-scale manufacturers, coupled with effective policy making, help citizens make sustainable choices on a daily basis.
Why don't I cycle to work? Well, because the part of the city where I live does not have enough safe cycling tracks. But what is your excuse for not cycling to work or not living a sustainable life? Well, we all have our reasons and most of us blame it on the city where we live. But Austria is creating a new district from scratch, which will have a lot of space for sustainability, but very little space for making excuses for not going with the sustainable option.
The Austrian capital, Vienna, is creating a completely new district. Seestadt Aspern is being constructed on a former airfield on the outskirts of town. 27,000 people are to live here one day. It's a testing ground for sustainable housing and living. The subway was built long before the first house was erected. It only takes 15 minutes to get from the center of the capital to Vienna's newest district. It's meant to be car-free, so bikes can be rented everywhere free of charge.
A very important aspect was the connection to public transport, right from the beginning. The first step was excavating the lake, and then the subway was built. The idea was that people knew from the start they could travel here using public transport, instead of at first taking their car and then having to relearn their behavior and get used to taking the subway.
The construction of Seestadt Aspern is being supported by several research teams. Magdalena Bürbäumer and Florian Püringer are investigating in a mobile lab how the residents of Seestadt travel. They get the data from an app, which I also download directly onto my cell phone. For the next few days, it will automatically record all the routes that my camera team and I take, plus info about the means of transport used and our CO2 consumption. The mobile lab shares its data with anyone who's interested: companies, city planners, and the residents themselves. The data is especially important for the planning phase. The new district is meant to learn from its mistakes.
At first, it was tolerated that you park your car in front of the door just in order to make your move easier. But that behavior quickly became established and turned into a habit. And when it was later penalized, there was a big fuss, although it was never planned that parking would be allowed there. So one of the things we've learned is to work with the development company to make sure that these things are taken into account in the newly built areas.
All over Seestadt Aspern, there are multi-story parking houses, which are very well camouflaged. But they're never closer than the next public transport stop, so that it's not more attractive to take the car. My camera team and I are on board. We load 70 kilos of equipment into a cargo bike. Kurt Hofstetter isn't only one of the planners of Seestadt Aspern, he's also one of the longest residents.
At first glance, it's nothing special. All the initial development is pretty much just concrete construction, with a few exceptions. But the sustainable aspect is it all comes from the lake. The lake didn't exist, it was excavated. In the environmental impact statement, it was stipulated that everyone driving in here with over a certain number of trucks a day would have to pay a toll. That made the concrete so expensive that it was cheaper to produce it on site with a plant we built here. So the first phase of Seestadt Aspern was virtually born out of the lake.
The artificial lake is the center of the neighborhood. The whole district is built slightly sloping towards it so that all the rainwater collects there. In addition, it's fed by the groundwater flow of the Danube River. Another core principle of Seestadt is social diversity. The sale of real estate within the project to private investors helps fund social housing and public developments. Here, sustainability also makes economic sense. Vast amounts of data are collected to ensure an optimized energy supply. Europe's largest ever energy research project, which employs over 200 people, is underway in Seestadt Aspern. Sensors are installed all over the district. They record in real time how much energy each building consumes and how much it produces.
This particular building is almost net zero. It uses just a little more electricity than it produces. Next door is an Energy Plus building. It produces more electricity than it consumes. And we can go one step further. Take a building that requires a lot of cooling. It will also have a lot of waste heat. That warm energy is released into the atmosphere, and that's problematic for the surrounding city. It's more efficient and intelligent to make the waste heat available to the neighboring building.
Identifying and solving problems together. Seestadt is all about community. That's the message I keep hearing. The last stop on my visit to Vienna is an intergenerational apartment block. The apartments are small, but there are also communal spaces and a roof garden. And here too, a strong sense of community.
It's sustainable living because we borrow things from each other. People ask, for instance, hey, can I borrow your iron? And I just have my grandson visiting, so I needed a cot, a baby rocker and a high chair. And I was able to borrow everything, so that was great.
Both women moved to Seestadt Aspern from much bigger apartments in the inner city, a move neither have ever regretted. All the buildings in the first construction phase have been state subsidized, which is why so many young families live here. The next development phase will see the construction of privately financed apartments, lofts, and terraced houses. Seestadt Aspern is a work in progress, learning, evolving, and flourishing.
Millet, a grain that we had all almost forgotten. Farmers would cultivate it, but then as the commercial demand of this grain went down, it also disappeared from the fields. But it has made a comeback and it is helping fight climate change, but also empowering women farmers.
In a world where commercial farming is on the rise, farmers from South India are challenging modern farming practices by taking up traditional farming that's best for the environment and future generations. And they do that through a women-only collective farming system in a predominantly male-dominated industry. First up are the women of Dharmapuri in Tamil Nadu, where for nearly 2 decades, an NGO called Women's Collective has been working closely with the farmers in this region. The land opposite is yours?
Yes, that's mine.
How big is your land?
About an acre? I have given about 50 cents for the collective.
Gopo has formed a collective with 3 other women from her village. On this piece of land, they share the workload and the profit among themselves. Ranganagi, the women's collective NGO's lead coordinator for Dharmapuri, has ensured that such small-scale collective farming groups are able to sustain themselves in an era of climate change and depleting resources by cultivating millets.
Global temperatures have changed these days, and so a month's worth of rainfall ends up happening in one day. That too, it doesn't rain where it needs to rain. And in this situation, the only crop that survives is millets. That's why we have chosen to grow millets to guarantee food security for our family's needs.
With millets, these women are able to tackle the unreliability associated with depending on income from cash crops.
We have gone through food shortage or scarcity where we were forced to buy rice. Rice, ariyam, kalakai and peanuts we can take as much as we want. But if we had to buy the same quantities at the store, it would exceed our budget. But if we grow them ourselves, we can consume as much small millets as we need. That's why we produce them.
Women here usually store their produce for at least a year in godowns like these. And to do that, they gather these millet heads as soon as they are ready for harvest to minimize losses due to birds and bad weather.
After we harvest the millets, we need to dry them. Once dried, we need to dehull them using a millet processing machine. We can then cook the small millets, grind them into powder, or grind them to make porridge and more.
Just like the women of Dharmapuri, about 6 hours away at Palakkad in Kerala, are farmers who practice agriculture through joint liability groups under the state Kudumbashree program, which aims to eradicate poverty and empower women. Every group has a minimum of 4 members and a maximum of 10 members where they can either take land on lease or use their own land to do agriculture.
Even if we don't own land, we lease land from others and work there. This is good for us because we don't need to go work elsewhere. We work independently. That's how we have been farming for the past 6 years.
Joint liability groups have been immensely successful in Kerala as they have helped women access agricultural credit from the banking system. This is done with the help of grassroots level block coordinators like Vanaja, taking care of farm, livelihood and animal husbandry activities.
If an individual directly approaches the bank and takes a loan, they have to produce collateral. Instead, if we take the land for lease, they don't have to produce any documents. They just need to produce the agreement, a copy of it, and tax receipts.
Vanaja encourages women in Chittoor to take up organic farming in their lands. To ensure they consistently practice organic farming, she regularly visits them to understand what they need and ensure they receive the necessary financial support from the block panchayat.
How much loan did you get? I have received 1.5 lakhs this time. Is there any panchayat scheme that enables the supply of fertilizers? You can use your incentive to facilitate this. Additionally, you can be part of a scheme called biopharmacy, where you can make your own organic fertilizers and supply it to other farmers.
The two groups of farmers in the story understand the relationship between food and health. In Kerala, the farmers are well aware of why they should practice organic farming.
When we use chemical fertilizers, it costs us a lot, plus it is very harmful for our health. Organic costs us less and is good for our health.
Similarly, in Dharmapuri, farmers understand that millets are rich in dietary fiber and micronutrients. So every day, these women whip up healthy millet-based meals that meet their dietary requirements. One of the best takeaways from the farmers of Dharmapuri and Palakkad is the fact that they rely not on the men in their families, but on the women within their communities to practice sustainable farming.
I have 5 family members dependent on me. I can't feed them all with the income I make. That's why if we produce our own food, we can generously feed everyone. This is why I decided to take up farming by myself. We can only make profits and can't get a salary. Loss or profit, we need to manage them both.
And through this, they've set an example in a male-dominated field that they too can own and manage a farm just as much as, or maybe even better than men.
When women are capable of making all decisions, why can't they also do the same in agriculture? Men are no longer considered the important ones in any role. Women are able to do any work as well.
How important is it that a woman owns land?
Yes, they should have it. Only if women are landowners are they respected. Otherwise, even our children won't respect us. Am I right?
These farmers from Tamil Nadu and Kerala in India have shown how women farming collectives are able to achieve success. They're able to continue sustainable farming practices to meet their daily needs on a local level and at the same time address challenges due to climate change on a global level.
Sustainability is usually about scale. To take from nature what we need is usually all right, but to take more than that turns into exploitation. And especially now, when the existing resources are already shrinking because of several anthropogenic factors. And the same goes for honeybees, for the honey and the beeswax that they produce. But living with them in unison is the only way to be. And there's this tribal community in the southern state of Tamil Nadu which is doing just that.
Raw, unpasteurized honey, packaged on the hills of India's Kodai Canal village. This golden liquid is helping to employ women and provide income for disadvantaged indigenous communities.
In the
last 4 to 5 years, there are nearly 10 women working here. Our unit was started in 2016. It was started by Nishita and Priya, our founders. They went into the forest to meet tribals for a project. They saw that they had lots of honey and they could not sell it. Then they thought that why not we buy it from them and sell it.
Mariappan is one of the honey gatherers from the Palyan tribe, living in the Shola forests in Tamil Nadu. The tribe has gathered honey for centuries.
We collect nearly a bucket full in each honey nest. In a year, we sometimes collect more than 2 tons of honey. We take climbing ropes to collect them, and we return back home only by 12 or 1 in the afternoon. When we collect honey in daylight, the bees sting us more. They sting us all over our body, but we don't stop collecting.
The Palayans use an age-old method that keep the bees from stinging.
We smoke out the bees in the nest, but we are careful to not hurt them. Fire burns their wings. So we tie these leaves together and use them to smoke them out. This just drives them away.
The smoke sedates the bees, causing them to be calm and less likely to sting beekeepers in defense.
There is fire inside the dried leaves, but only smoke comes out.
Researchers are not sure why exactly bees respond to smoke in that manner, but some suggest honeybees have fewer alarm bells ringing with smoke around them, making it easier to collect the honey. In the village, the women buy and package the honey. From the bee wax, they produce compostable food wraps as well as crayons.
Since the beeswax wraps are seen as an alternative to plastics, we export it to many countries.
But the honey economy is being threatened here in Tamil Nadu, like in many other parts of the world.
Bees are going extinct. Since there is a lot of pesticide used for vegetables, the bees which come here to collect from flowers die on the way back to their nests.
Although the importance of bees in their role as pollinators is well known, bee populations are declining globally, mainly because of pesticides and habitat loss. In Europe alone, their numbers have reduced by about 30%. Mariappan says he tries to stay away from baby bees and leave some honey for the colonies to feed on. For now, he and the women's cooperative can still make a profit. The cooperative's plan is to expand operations while keeping nature in mind.
Like I said in the beginning of this episode, the only sustainable way to be is to work with nature and not against it. And all of these stories today just showed us why. But you let me know what type of stories would you like to see more of in the future. You can email us or reach out to me directly on my social media. I will see you next week. Until then, take care, goodbye, namaskar.